Hello, you are watching Middle East Matters here on France 24. I'm Nadia Massih. In the show this week, we look into an historic legal case here in France. A French ISIS member convicted for his involvement in the genocide of the Yazidi minority in Iraq and in Syria in 2014. Sabri Yazid was tried in absentia, but nonetheless, campaigners say this is a victory for justice and a victory for the Yazidi survivors who bravely spoke up to give their testimony in the court here in Paris. Well, we will look in a moment at the legal implications of this verdict. But first, my colleague Gabrielle Nadler takes us back more than a decade to Mosul and Sinjar as the Islamic State group was consolidating its caliphate to remind us of the violence endured by the Yazidis at the hands of ISIS.
Rayhan remembers the day she was kidnapped at 14. An ethnic Yazidi, she was taken by the Islamic State and sold as a slave here in Mosul. At the crossroads where she was abducted, 3 of her 8 brothers were killed.
They captured us at Hardan's crossroad, then took us to Shababik. And from there they took us to Tel Afar, to a school there, then to the Badouche prison. The Islamic State group was taking the young women and girls one by one. When they took us, my brother and I were crying. We were very young. We were crying.
In 2018, Rayhan was able to escape from Syria, where she'd been taken, and reach Turkey on foot. She stayed in hiding with another survivor until she found her brother, Shihab, on Facebook, and eventually was able to return to Sinjar. Rayhan says her story is one of many others like it.
What happened to me happened to all Yazidi women. I lost everything, but I came back to life.
The Yazidis are an Iraqi ethnic and religious minority and are one of the groups who have been in the region the longest. In August 2014, the Islamic State group began its assault on the Yazidi people with a massacre in the Sinjar region, leaving thousands dead and displacing and capturing community members. A United Nations commission documented the Islamic State's ensuing crimes against the Yazidi people. Men were killed in mass executions or forced to convert to Islam. Boys were sent into Islamic State training camps. And women and girls as young as 9 were sold into sexual slavery and systematically raped. The UN estimated the Islamic group killed over 5,000 and abducted over 6,000 Yazidis. As of 2022, about 3,000 Yazidi people were missing and over 200,000 remained displaced, according to the UN Refugee Agency. The Islamic State's genocide of the Yazidi people has never been subject to an investigation by the International Criminal Court. However, in national courts across Europe, most recently in France, Islamic State members have been convicted of genocide and crimes against humanity. Yazidi survivor and activist Nadia Massih, awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2018 for her efforts to end sexual violence as a weapon of war, said justice is what survivors want most.
The culture of impunity for perpetrators, that's the most important and needed thing, that the culture of impunity must not be an option. And survivors want their day in court.
The trials are finally giving the Yazidi people the chance to seek justice, over a decade on.
It's Gabrielle Nadler with our report. And with me now is Clemence Bectard. She's a lawyer who represented 3 Yazidi survivors and 8 of their children in this case we're talking about today. Thank you very much indeed for speaking to us here on the programme.
Thank you.
Look, your 3 adult clients, they're all women. Tell us as much as you can, a little of their stories and how it is that they ended up here in France giving testimony here.
Well, 3 of them were abducted, were living in villages in Mount Sinjar, and were abducted on the 3rd of August 2014, when the genocide began, with their children. They were then held in different villages and then prisons in Mosul, in Tel Afar, in different places in Iraq. and then separated from their husbands, who were executed, and they were then sent to Syria, where they were subjected to sexual slavery for years with their children. They have suffered tremendous amount of violence. Some of them were sold and bought and detained by more than 10 ISIS members, and they finally managed to escape, and now 2 of them are living in exile outside of Iraq.
And we can only begin to imagine, given the scale of what these women went through, how difficult it must have been to speak about that in court.
It is extremely difficult, but for them, justice is necessary. It's at the center of the reason why they decided to deliver this testimony. First of all, at the investigative stage, where judges were investigating these crimes, and then in court, 2 of them were present in court with their children and testified and confirmed the horrendous crimes that they had suffered, including in the hands of one French ISIS member who was tried and convicted last week. It was very important for them not only to see justice, to get this conviction. Of course, it's not, a wider investigation such as it could have been before the International Criminal Court, for example, but nonetheless, it is very important for them, because for them, the greatest danger is to forget about these crimes, is to forget what the Yazidi community have suffered. And it is very important also for them to testify not only in their name of their families, of their children who have suffered also with them, but also in the name of the whole Yazidi community.
And as you say, look, this was the trial of one individual, a Frenchman, Sabri Yazid. For the survivors that you spoke to, these 3 women in particular, does it feel now like justice has been done, given that we are talking about one man, and one man who, it's important to say, was tried in absentia, meaning he was not present in court?
It is a step towards justice, but a significant step. They, of course, aware that, all the suspects of ISIS who have committed these crimes have not been prosecuted or convicted. We're far from that. This is only the 15th trial, actually, that is taking place. It was the first in France, but there are other European jurisdictions who have already organized trials that resulted in convictions for genocide and crimes against humanity. But it is nonetheless an important step, also because it is now a new jurisdiction, France, that had never organized such a trial, that is now considering to organize other trials and to prosecute other French ISIS members. And for them, it is really essential that this quest for justice continues, because again, it is also a way to remember the crimes that were perpetrated, and also for them to shed light on the current situation of the Yazidi community, because all these survivors have not been, in their immense majority, able to go back to their villages in the Mount Sinjar. So there continues to be now a necessity for them to continue to talk about this genocide, about what has happened, and about the consequences also on the whole community.
Clemence Bectarte, don't go away. I have a few more questions I want to ask you. But before we do, I'd like to play a clip. This is from Farhad Shamo Rotto. He himself is a Yazidi activist. He's a survivor as well. He attended the trial that you participated in as the lawyer here. He spoke to my colleague Caris Garland earlier on today about the challenges faced by the survivors, those who are now in Iraq, in Sinjar, but also some who are here in Europe who say they face challenges with their asylum applications. Let's just have a listen to a little of what he's had to say.
As now we are approaching for the 12th commemoration of this genocide, Sinjar has had no functioning administration and official security for 11 years. And these have kept our people in perpetual uncertainty and instability. Our people are still waiting, not just for justice or for the over 2,000 women and children remain missing, but for the condition to live in dignity. And we are also waiting for a chance to be able to offer our loved one a dignified burial from over 90 mass graves discovered. For the past decade, Sinjar have faced blockade policy from Kurdistan regional government, neglected by Iraq and international community. International community have pledged to protect us and to help us recovery and to stabilize our homeland, but instead they have funded our life in displacement. As a result, for 11 years, our children are growing up in the camps. Families remain separated, and many of those who seeking refuge in European country are facing rejection of their asylum application and even deportation from countries like Germany, France, and the Netherlands. If we are to endure and to recover and to thrive, we need the world to fulfill many promises made to us after 2014. ISIS attempt to eradicate our community and giving up on us would be their victory. Yazidi has been calling for formation of an international commission to resolve this genocide through an agreement between international community and Iraqi government so that we can govern our own homeland and we can prevent future genocide.
About the testimony there of another survivor, a Yazidi activist, and Clemence Bectarte, still with me, the lawyer who worked on the case, who was listening to that. Clemence, I don't know whether this affects your clients in particular, but I'm sure you know people in the community more widely. And I wondered whether you had any reflections on what we were just hearing there about the fact that there are apparently Yazidis, he said, even here in France, who face the possibility of deportation. Is that something you're aware of?
I'm not aware of any individual situation in France of any Yazidi survivor who has been in this situation. But again, this kind of trial is also a way, and this is very important for my clients, but for Yazidi survivors as a whole, to shed light on the current situation again of the Yazidis, and they need some political support and some mobilization from the international community. And what this activist was saying is very true. There is a sense of forgetting by the international community what happened. This is only a decade ago, and the fact that despite the tremendous amount of crime suffered by the Yazidi community, they are not today allowed to go back to their villages. Their villages haven't been reconstructed. There is no political support either from the central Iraqi authorities nor from the Kurdish authorities to allow the Yazidi to go back to their homes. And the part of the Yazidi community who is today in exile is only wishing to go back to their country. My clients were telling me, we're living abroad because for our children, because we don't want to live in refugee camps, because the living conditions are too hard there. But our wish is to go back to Sinjar and to be able to continue also and to continue to transmit the Yazidi identity. What you have to remember also is that all the cultural places, the temples have been destroyed. So there's a real threat also on the continuity of the Yazidi identity and practice of religion as such.
Clemence Bectarte, there is more I'd like to ask you, but unfortunately we're out of time. I want to thank you very much indeed for your time today. It's been great to get your thoughts here on Middle East matters.
Thank you very much.
And with that, that's it for the programme this week. You've been watching Middle East Matters here on France 24's Around the World.